Ridgeway, a town that once epitomized the essence of tranquility and simplicity, a town where time moved slowly, where children played freely, their laughter echoing through the streets, a testament to the innocence that once thrived here, where neighbors knew your name and every face was familiar. It was a place where community meant everything, and everyone looked out for one another. Until now. Now, fear clung to the crisp autumn air, a shroud over the once peaceful community. The streets that were once filled with the sounds of life and laughter were now eerily silent, as if the town itself was holding its breath. A killer walked among them, preying on the city's insomniacs. The darkness that once brought comfort now brought terror, as the residents of Ridgeway found themselves looking over their shoulders, fearing the unknown. Each victim, a member of the same online support group, a group that was meant to be a safe haven for those struggling with sleepless nights, had become a hunting ground for a predator. Each murder, more gruesome than the last. The brutality of the crimes left the town in shock, unable to comprehend the horror that had invaded their lives. The local newspaper, usually filled with bake sale announcements and missing pet notices, now screamed headlines of horror. The front pages were dominated by stories of fear and death, a stark contrast to the mundane news that once filled its columns. The police, out of their depth, offered little comfort. Their frustration was palpable, as they struggled to piece together the clues and bring the killer to justice. The sense of security that the residents once felt was shattered, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The residents of Ridgeway were trapped, living a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. They peered out from behind closed curtains, their once warm and welcoming homes now fortresses of fear. The sense of community that had once defined Ridgeway was now overshadowed by suspicion and paranoia, as everyone wondered who would be next. Lauren tossed and turned, the digital clock mocking her with its glowing red numbers. 3:17 a.m. Sleep, once again, eluded her. Her phone buzzed, a notification from the online support group, Sleepless in Ridgeway. A pang of anxiety shot through her. 3 members, gone, murdered. They had been strangers brought together by their shared struggle with sleep. Now they were linked by a terrifying fate. Each night, the fear gnawed at Lauren. Would she be next? Days bled into sleepless nights. The once comforting embrace of darkness now felt like a suffocating shroud. Each tick of the clock echoed louder, a constant reminder of the relentless passage of time. Lauren's fear morphed into an icy paranoia. She could no longer distinguish between reality and the figments of her imagination. Every shadow seemed to harbor a threat, every sound a potential danger. The shadows in her room seemed to writhe and whisper, their movements synchronized with her escalating heartbeat. They danced on the walls, creating grotesque shapes that taunted her sanity. Every creak of the floorboard sent her heart racing. The once familiar sounds of her home now felt foreign and menacing. She would jump at the slightest noise, her mind conjuring up the worst possible scenarios. She scrutinized every face she passed, searching for any sign, any clue that someone was watching her. The paranoia extended beyond the confines of her home, infiltrating every aspect of her life. Then the messages started. Cryptic, threatening texts from an unknown number. Each message was a puzzle, a riddle that only deepened her fear. They were short, but their impact was profound. "Can't sleep, can you?" one read. "You're next," another warned. The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that crushed her spirit. She felt trapped, with no escape from the invisible tormentor. The messages were always sent at 3:17 a.m., the time she usually sought solace in the online group. It was as if the sender knew her routine, her habits, and was using that knowledge to break her down. The consistency of the timing added a layer of psychological torture, making her dread the early morning hours. She would lie awake, staring at her phone, waiting for the inevitable message that would shatter her fragile sense of security. The terror wasn't confined to the shadows anymore. It had found a new medium, a new way to infiltrate her life. The darkness that once lurked in the corners of her room had now seeped into the very device she held in her hand every day. It had seeped into her phone, into her safe space. The messages were relentless, each one more disturbing than the last. They invaded her thoughts, her dreams, turning her sanctuary into a battlefield. The device that once connected her to a community now felt like a weapon pointed at her. Every time she picked it up, her heart raced, her palms grew sweaty. The once comforting glow of the screen now cast ominous shadows on her face. Every buzz, every notification sent chills down her spine. The sound that once signaled a friendly message or a social update now felt like the tolling of a death knell. She couldn't escape it, couldn't turn it off. It was everywhere, all the time. Lauren contacted the police, showing them the messages. She hoped they would understand, that they would see the danger she was in. She needed them to take it seriously, to protect her from the unseen threat that had taken over her life. But with no concrete evidence, they dismissed it as a cruel prank. They were wrong. The fear in her eyes, the tremor in her voice, it was all real. The police couldn't see it, but Lauren could feel it. She knew this was more than just a joke. Lauren could feel it in her bones. This was no joke. It was a countdown. Each message, each notification was a tick of the clock, a step closer to an unknown but inevitable end. She had to find a way to stop it, to reclaim her life from the grip of fear. Determined to unmask her stalker, Lauren decided to stay awake. Tonight she would be ready. She set up her laptop, the glow casting an eerie light on her face. The clock ticked past midnight, each second a hammer blow to her resolve. Finally, 3:16 a.m. She held her breath, her finger hovering over the mouse pad. A notification popped up, a message request on Instagram. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't a text this time, it was an image. The photo displayed a darkened living room, eerily similar to her own. The caption sent a shiver down her spine. "You have a lovely home." Panic surged through her. This wasn't just a stalker, it was someone who had been inside her house. Her eyes darted to her own living room, her heart pounding in her chest. The furniture, the lamp, everything matched the photo. Her blood turned to ice. He wasn't watching her from afar. He was already inside. Suddenly, a noise from behind her. She whirled around, her breath catching in her throat. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint moonlight, was a figure. Tall, imposing, and utterly terrifying. Her scream died in her throat, choked by fear. The laptop slipped from her grasp, crashing to the floor with a sickening thud. He was here, and he had been watching her all along. The phone rang, the shrill tone cutting through the silence. It was her own number flashing on the screen. Her hand trembled as she reached for it, her mind screaming at her not to answer. "Hello?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't have stayed up so late, Lauren." A deep, raspy voice chuckled from the other end. "Now we can finally get some sleep." The phone clattered to the floor. Lauren scrambled back, her mind racing. She had to get out, to call for help. But every exit was blocked, every corner a potential hiding place for the intruder. He was playing with her, toying with her like a predator savoring the hunt. Her apartment, once her sanctuary, had become a terrifying labyrinth with no escape. The chase began. He pursued her relentlessly through the apartment, his heavy footsteps echoing her own panicked breaths. Each narrow escape heightened her terror, pushing her closer to the brink. Then, in a horrifying flash, the lights flickered on. Standing before her, holding a gleaming knife, was not a stranger but a face she knew. The friendly barista from the coffee shop she frequented, the one who always asked about her insomnia. "You seemed so lonely," he whispered, a chilling smile spreading across his face. "I thought I could help you sleep." He lunged, the knife plunging towards her, the glint of metal the last thing she saw. The screen fades to black. Then a whisper, barely audible, breaks the silence. "Sweet dreams, Ridgeway."